And, you know, I look forward. It's a break. You know, it's one of those where by the time the season ends here, which I'm getting close, I'm ready to leave and go somewhere else for the winter. And then once winter's over, I'm ready to come back up and start living and doing the things up here again.
I think that, well, that's what a lot of people want to do. And when I lived in Arizona, the Phoenix area, it was full of retirees, but they were pretty much housebound. You know, they had a house in Wisconsin and a house in Sun City. But the mobility, I love.
Me too. And I'm not trying, because people confuse me with a snowbird. And I go, no, not really. I mean, yeah, the lifestyle in a way, but you know, my house is on 20 acres up here. I'm in the mountains, and I'm looking for a place in southern Arizona, the same, not necessarily off the grid, because I don't know if I want to go off the grid to off the grid. But I'll see. But I want land again. I want views. I don't want to live in a, you know, in a residential neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, I think we have some people here, and welcome everybody. I've been telling you about Gary's book for a while, and I have linked to it before on my Facebook page, and I will link to it. I think I have like a webinar video description with the accompanies this video recording. So I'll make sure that I put the link there. It's Amazon, and he has authored 1 or 2 other books, and he just mentioned he has another one coming up. Gary, what is the new book about?
It's called Living Off the Grid. It's the follow-up to my book, Going Off the Grid. So it'll be more about the things that I've learned and how the lifestyle and the day-to-days and more of the lessons past. Because Going Off the Grid was more about how my journey and how I got to that point and building. This one's more of the living aspect and what I've learned from it, and, you know, what other people can take. And then I'm going to be doing a Decluttering Your Life book that will be out in June of 2019. And then there's another book, possibly another series through a publishing company that we have not determined the topic yet.
Awesome.
So there's a lot coming out on this type of lifestyle and simple living that I'm going to be putting out.
I think that as we go through our conversation this morning, a big piece I know of what people are going to want is what you mentioned, just the day-to-day living. Yeah. The laundry and grocery shopping and expenses and, you know, all the little things that, you know, here in my house, I just grab a vacuum cleaner or the washing machine and, you know, away we go. It's a little bit different when you're traveling. So want to know about that. Hey, everybody, how are you doing? I see Cindy here. And Cindy, I think you have lived in an RV before. I think you mentioned that before in a comment. And Julie, oh, I recognize you too. You had mentioned that you were really interested in this. So we are going to be starting now, as a matter of fact. So I'm the survival mom, Lisa Bedford, and my guest this morning is Gary Collins, and you see him in the camera right next to me. So if you are watching, why don't you let us know where you're watching us from? And I'm interested in as well, are any of you in harm's way with that, with a hurricane? I was just watching a video that was showing some of the initial surge right off the coast of South Carolina. So I'm hearing from some of you in emails and comments in different places that, you know, you've packed up and you've left. One lady today said she's right now in a hotel with 4 little kids and 4 dogs. So can we all say a prayer for her? Anyway, we are going to be talking today about the whole concept of living a more mobile lifestyle. And the people who are, you know, my blog readers and Facebook followers, I know, hi, Richard, in Phoenix. I escaped Phoenix about almost 5 years ago, lived there for most of my life. But the transition, so what does it take to live this mobile lifestyle? Maybe you might have heard Gary commenting before we officially started that, you know, he enjoys having an off-grid property on several acres, as well as having the option to just, you know, load up and get on the road to wherever he might want to go. So we're going to begin by talking about that transition. Part of it is a physical transition where you're getting rid of stuff and you're selling things, as well as a kind of a mental and mindset transition. So let me welcome a couple people. Leslie in California, how are you doing? You're far from the hurricane, which is good news. And Kim in Wisconsin, she says, actually, they're planning on the next 4 years to go full-time in an RV. And, you know, Gary, try to help me. Let's remember to maybe answer or maybe to address full-time 12-month living in an RV versus what you do, which is kind of back and forth? I'm sure
I've done both. I lived in my RV for 4 years straight.
Awesome. Okay, well then you know it all. So we're just gonna depend on you. Jonathan from Tennessee. Jonathan, I went to Tennessee for the first time about 2 months ago. My son went to Glider Academy there, just south of Nashville, and it was beautiful. He actually would love to live in Tennessee. So Gary, how many states have you been to in your RV as you've been traveling?
Oh gosh, not a ton. I've lived in 3 states.
Okay.
So it depends when I travel. I'm an odd bird in the sense I've gone back and forth through the U.S. 4 times. And depending what I'm doing, with 20 years in the, government, I've lived all over. I've lived in 9 states, traveled all over the world. So I'll use my RV for certain situations, but if I'm doing shorter term travel, I just road trip it in my truck. I've slept in my truck probably hundreds of days over my life. I just sleep in the back. I don't care.
Yeah.
So it just depends what I'm doing. If I'm going to be in a place longer, I'll do the RV. If I'm short terming, I don't bring it because it's you're towing it. It's expensive on gas.
Right.
So
that's a good plan, though. You have multiple options depending on what you feel like doing or you need to do.
Yeah.
Let's get started. What year would you say that you started to get kind of itchy with your traditional life where you were working the full-time job and you had the house and you had a lot of the, the expensive things that we burden ourselves with? About what year was that?
Oh, gosh. I would say it first started around 2006. 2005. I was living in Albuquerque, New Mexico at the time. And Albuquerque, New Mexico, it's a big city in New Mexico, but it's more rural. I mean, I lived close to the mountains, to the Sandia Mountains, and I mountain biked from my house to the trails. But I moved back to California, in Southern California specifically, and that's where it really kind of hit home. I'm like, I can't live like this anymore. So it's been over a decade when the plan originally started. So, a lot of people who don't know my background will say, oh, well, I can't do that. I can't just pack up and leave. I went, this took a long time. I mean, this was a long-term plan that I put in place.
I can really appreciate that. You started out by downsizing everything, including your house. Why don't you tell us just briefly, just a little bit about that process? Because you ended up renting for quite a while.
I did. It was one of those, it was during the boom. So I bought at the tail end of the boom as prices started to go down. And it was the typical, shouldn't have bought a house that big. Had a lot of stuff, rooms filled with crap that I never used. And it just all kind of, I left the government, was soul searching. After you spend half your life in the federal government doing what I did, there's a lot to figure out in life, is the best way to put it. And it's a big transition. And I went, let me come up with my plan. Let me figure it out. But I just kind of realized that this house was an anchor. It had trapped me. And what do you do about it? So I had to make a decision, and I actually sold it for a significant loss. But it was one of those, what do you do? Do you suck it up and let that house take you down? Or do you go, I need to just cut the anchor and get out of this? And that's what I decided. And it helped me kind of boost into the next stage of my life that I had planned for. And when I did that, it was a fairly quick decision, probably over about 60 days, where I kind of went, okay, time to get rid of it, figure this out. I put everything on Craigslist, and I sold almost all of it in 48 hours. I cleared that place out. I sold everything. I left with just a small U-Haul trailer. I'm talking the small one. I think it was a 6x8. That was it. So I sold. I think I made over $10,000 in 48 hours. Some people rolled up with trailers and said, "What do you got?"
Interesting. Yeah.
And one guy bought probably half of my stuff. He just went through and looked at it and went, "I'll take all this." Yeah. And he had his trailer ready to go. And I'm sure he was reselling it, which I didn't care. It didn't matter to me. But I remember the last thing I sold. This was the symbolic kind of moment of my transition. I had this kitchen table. I think it seated 8, if I remember right. Me and a girlfriend, we had eaten at it like twice. I don't think I'd ever eaten at it by myself.
Right. Yeah.
And I spent all this time trying to find this perfect table. You know, I shopped all over, got it, put it together, and it just sat there and collected dust is all it basically did. And I remember a guy, he was in the military, and he wanted it for his family. Comes up and he goes, "I'll take it." He looks at it and goes, "I'll take it." It's like the last thing. So we take it apart. We're putting it on his car. And I remember him driving away. And we literally put it on his roof. He had an SUV. He didn't even have the space. That's how big this table was. It wouldn't even fit inside the SUV. Wow. And he's driving off, and I'm looking at it. And I remember this sense of relief of like just all this weight had been lifted off me, because I knew that this next transition, I didn't have all this crap to take with me. It was done. And you would think it's the opposite of how we live in America today, for the most part. And it was the end of my journey of consumerism, is the best way to put it too. That was me getting off the treadmill of buy everything to fill the void of what I was taught would make me happy. And I realized it did not. So that was the big transition.
I'm curious, as you're talking, those of you that are watching, and maybe those of you that watch the recording, why don't you hit one of the Facebook reactions, the heart or the happy face or the wow? Does this resonate with you? Are you thinking to yourself, yeah, I do feel kind of burdened down by everything that I own? I kind of relate to how Gary is, what his thought process was. So the next thing, Gary, you ended up moving and selling that house. You said at a loss. You got rid of everything except what you could fit in a little U-Haul. And then you went looking for a rental, and you lived in that rental for about 4 years. Am I right?
It was over 4 years. I think it was right around 4.5. And it took me a while. I spent about 6 months looking for my property. So it was, like I said, this transition period of once I made the decision. I actually lived in an empty house for a while. and with that, yeah, I just looked around, and I had 2 large dogs that most people did not want to rent to in the city area. So it pushed me further and further out. And I found this cool little cottage, about 475 square feet. I measured it. The owners didn't even know how big it was. I finally, one day I went in there and measured it to figure out what the square footage was. And so I went from a roughly 1,700 square foot house, 2.5 bath, 2-car garage, to a basically house studio. That's what a cottage is. It's a house that's a studio. There are no separate rooms besides the bathroom. The bathroom is usually separated, but that was it. Yeah. And yeah, I ended up staying there. My landlords were fantastic. I can still talk to them today. And yeah, I stayed there 4.5 years, plotting out my next move. And not only that, but I started a business. I was working other jobs. I was a college professor. I ran a health food company. I was consulting. I was doing anything I could to fill in the gap, to figure out where I was going and how I was going to do it and how to support myself. I mean, that's obviously a huge question, right?
Yeah. I mean, you have the gas costs money, and like you mentioned before, it can be expensive hauling the RV or driving the RV. So what kind of RV did you eventually decide upon?
Well, and I was a rookie. I had friends who had RVs, and my grandparents had one, but I was very little experience. So I started doing my research and trying to figure it out. I ended up buying an 18-foot ultralight at the time. And I was living in this small place in my cottage. And it was at the tail end of probably the last year and a half I was there, I bought it. And I'd done my research, tried to figure it out. That made the most sense at the time. I wanted something small that I could move around. And also I had bought my property at that time. So I wanted to try and get this travel trailer. I needed something small to get to the property because this is pretty steep. It's remote. And I thought I had my whole plan. The funny part is I couldn't get the RV up here. So that plan did not work living on the property because the roads were too rough. The only way I would get it up is with a bulldozer, basically towing it up, and then I would never get it out, kind of thing. So I said, interesting. Yeah, I said, forget it. I found a couple RV parks down below me, luckily, So that's where I ended up, and I rented a cabin in between real briefly while I was kind of figuring things out. So I made sure to be, the best way is to be flexible. You know, I didn't just narrow tunnel vision and say, if it doesn't work, this is it. I said, you know what? Plan B, figure it out. And that's when I bought. So it was a used 18-foot ultralight. I want to say it was around a 2007, 2006. And it was in great shape, but I had a smaller truck. I had a V6 Tacoma, Toyota Tacoma 4-wheel drive. So I needed something that I could tow at the time because I just didn't know. And that's the best advice I can give people. That's why I went through the whole gamut of this is an adventure in the book. This is very common. Your first RV, I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of RV owners at this point. The first one's not your last one. The first one is usually the experimental one where you kind of figure out, A, do you like the lifestyle? And B, if you do, is this the right RV for you? Then you make a decision the next jump. So yeah, you're never going to get it perfect the first time. I mean, that's just the way life works.
So what price range would someone be looking at getting into something, you know, like their starter RV? What do you think is a reasonable dollar amount?
It
there are a lot of I guess there are a lot of variables.
There's a ton of variables. When it comes to RVs, the selection is almost unlimited. Whatever lifestyle you plan to choose, there's an RV for it. I picked a travel trailer. Now, a travel trailer and fifth wheels are different. And this is the biggest question I usually get is, what's the difference between a fifth wheel and a travel trailer? Well, fifth wheels are bigger. They have a higher ceiling. They're more expensive, but they're easier to tow in the sense when you tow them with a full-size truck because they sit in your bed. So the hitch is in the bed of your truck. A travel trailer, we call it a tow behind because you're towing it behind your vehicle. It goes to your tow hitch that fits into your tow hitch at your bumper. Different, totally different the way they work. But the average price, you can get in decently for around, I'd say, $8,000 to $10,000 for a used one. Good shape. I mean, you know, fairly new. And people go, "Oh my God, that's a lot of money."
I don't think that's a lot less than I would have thought.
Well, and I'm a realist, and I tell people this lifestyle still takes money. Don't get caught in those TV shows and those great popular blogs that say you can just sell your belongings, buy, you know, something on dirt cheap. And people do that, but most of those people fail is what you don't see. So it takes money and plan, but on average, you can get in with a good truck, travel trailer, starting around $30,000, I would say. I recommend $35,000 budget to start. And again, people go, "Oh Lord." I go, "Well, think of the average price of a house today. It's $240,000 for a house that's just on the market, already built. It's $400,000 to have a house built. That's the average today. So if you can get into a travel trailer and a vehicle for $35,000, that is nothing.
Now I have a question here from Richard. He wants to know, Gary, are there any RVs that you know of that are truly four season and that could handle a heavy duty winter?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Mine is. The one I have right now is. They're more made in they're up here in the Pacific Northwest because obviously we're below Alaska, even though we're a ways away. But the one I use and the one I recommend, it's made by Northwood. It's called the Arctic Fox. I have the Nash version, which is a lesser version because I don't live in the extremes, but mine is a 4-season rated travel trailer. They're out there, and I talk about that in the book. I recommend a 4-season because they're just built better. They're better built. Dual pane windows. I talk about the windows in them, the differences. You want, unless you're camping, the lower end ones that are not 4-season, and there's nothing wrong with them, but they're made primarily for camping weekends. That's what they're made for. They're not made to be in extreme conditions for a long period of time.
I have a foster dog that my little dog does not appreciate. And so they're kind of a little tussle over here. The foster dog is part husky, and she's a handful. But anyway, okay. So do you travel now with your dogs, Gary? Do you still have dogs?
I do. I have one. My other two passed away right as I was going on this adventure, and I have a 100+ pound lab. He's downstairs. He doesn't like getting up the stairs here, so lucky. Yeah, but I live and travel with my dog, and that's something we should just real briefly I'll talk about, because I always get told, well, you're single, all you have is a dog, you can do this, I can't. That is not true. The majority of people living the lifestyle I live today are married and or with kids.
Really?
Yes.
What age range would you say?
Varies. The younger, there isn't a ton of younger people doing it in the way I'm doing it that I'm seeing. It's usually on average, I would say 35 to 60. There are younger people doing it. They're catching on. Yeah. But for the most part, it tends to be in the older range a little bit. But I'm telling you, I know people who homeschool out of their travel trailer, 3 kids. My neighbors were that way at the last park I was at. Single people are the exception. They are not the rule. So, trust me.
Foster dog has a squeaky toy that is a pig and snorts.
I can tell. That's a good one.
Here she is. Let's see. Let's start getting into just like the nuts and bolts of it. So we have an idea of, and I think that you made a really, one thing I really appreciated, Gary, is that this wasn't a spur of the moment decision. You really took your time to thoughtfully do it. You took years to kind of position yourself where you had ways to earn money. And here.
That's a good one. Yeah, I like that play.
Let's see. But I can appreciate that. So nuts and bolts. So you're on the road. What have you found to be the biggest everyday challenges?
Probably the biggest everyday challenge for me was running my business. And I had done that so I didn't jump into this without knowing how I was going to run my business. I experimented and tested everything out well before I went on the road. Probably the biggest challenge would be as far as figuring out the proper setup, I would say, and having the plan, because you don't know. You don't know until you do it. You have no idea, because people ask me, they go, Gary, can you tell me what setup I need? And I go, absolutely not. I don't know. I don't know what your lifestyle is. I don't know what your wants and needs are. I can give you an idea by what I've done, but I can't map it out for you. You kind of have to figure that out. So I would say the biggest probably, is figuring out what setup you need and what is the lifestyle you intend to live.
Yeah. How easy is it to resell?
Travel trailers are easy to resell. Okay. I have not had a problem selling any of mine. I'm on my 3rd one. Okay. Sold them within a week.
Yeah. Now, and do you do that private party or do you go through a dealer?
One was private party. One was a dealer.
Okay. So it's not like buying a house really, where you may sit in a house that's for sale for months before you can unload it.
Exactly. What I've found, though, if you buy right, you buy obviously a desirable travel trailer, and you buy at the right price, you'll get rid of it fairly quickly. The more expensive and the bigger the travel trailer is, the harder RV, the harder it's gonna be to sell.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So you mentioned the challenges, kind of having a plan, knowing what you want, lifestyle. What about the practicalities? Someone wanted to know about dogs. What are the rules when it comes to dogs and the places where you stop? Are these places dog friendly?
Everyone has been, but you have to make sure, obviously, that they have a dog park. And today it's very hard to find an RV park that doesn't have a dog park and allow pets, because another misnomer, the majority of people have pets living this lifestyle, and usually more than one. So, matter of fact, only one person next to me did not have a dog in the last RV park I was at. Almost everyone had pets.
A couple of you probably know this, Gary, but RVing and travel trailers, that's huge in Europe. So in June, we were in Ireland, and more families than not had dogs with them, sometimes more than one. And they had, they'd have like a wire pen they'd set outside, and they'd take the dogs for a walk. And, they seem to be pretty welcome anywhere. One question that came up here is Chris wanted to know about homeschooling. And I think, you know, because we're homeschoolers, and it seems to me that as long as you have gone through the whole sequence of events that Gary described, where you're eliminating, you know, stuff that you own and you're finding ways to earn money no matter where you are in the world, yeah, you can homeschool. I have wanted to do this. It's my husband's job that keeps us kind of tied down, but yeah. And then Sandra Thornberry, she wants to know, do you ever feel disconnected from a community?
No, and that's because I'm usually around people when I'm up. Now, this is my off the grid house where we're at right now, where I'm at. This is the one in the mountains. And, you know, it can, you know, if I stay up here for multiple days, yeah, you can get a little isolated, but I'm also a writer. You know, I run a business, so that's good for me. There's times when I need stretches of, I need to get stuff done without any distractions. But I usually go into town 3 days a week. I have to go to a city to do my shopping and get my materials for any projects I have. And in the RV parks, you're around people. I mean, there's people around you everywhere. I mean, they're there too. You have more space in between you than a normal residential neighborhood today. But the RV parks it's very friendly. I've only had one problem with an individual in an RV park, and it was just, you get idiots everywhere you go.
Right.
But I would say in general, in the RV park world, I've had very little problems comparably. Because everyone has to behave or you get kicked out.
That's interesting. Someone wants to know how you stay your internet connection. So where you are now in an off-grid home, and then when you're on the road, what do you use for an internet connection?
I was one of the first people to actually buy the Verizon Jetpack, which is a hotspot. It's a Wi-Fi hotspot. Because I remember when I bought it, I went in, they sent me to a store to go get it because they didn't even have it. I think when I tried calling them, they said, hey, you got to go to a store. The guy goes, this is the first one I've sold. So I was kind of the experiment a little bit, and I've been using one ever since.
Right.
So I use that, and I have reception. I'm at the top of a mountain, but 10 miles on another mountain is a cell tower. So I have a line of sight. I'm lucky. If you go in the valley, actually, I lose reception.
Right.
So that's what I have used on the road. And most RV parks have Wi-Fi.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Let's see. We have someone who wants to talk to you offline, Gary. Okay. So what I told Gary is that I know most people will be watching this as a recording. So if you have questions for Gary, just leave them in the comments. And then I've asked him, you know, if every once in a while he could kind of scroll through and see if there is anything that, you know, he might be able to answer. A lot of the information will be in your book. Gary, going back to your book and just kind of the practicalities, for things just like everyday chores, you know, I'm just thinking, you know, as a mom, you know, we have, you know, cooking and we have laundry and we have cleaning. I'm expecting that's a whole lot easier in an RV just because of the smallness. Is there anything that, you know, you find any chore or task? A squirrel is up there on my bird feeder, which is about 8 feet tall, 9 feet tall. Squirrels. But do you find anything that becomes more difficult, has become more difficult or more, I don't even know, more inconvenient because of the whole RV living?
The only thing really is probably laundry. You know, but the bigger fifth wheels now, they all have laundry in them. You can put a stackable washer and dryer in the newer, even older. My parents have one that they've never used. I want to say it's a 2006 fifth wheel, and it has washer and dryer hookups in it. So a lot of the fifth wheels have them. The new ones, almost all of them have them. But yeah, it's usually laundry. You know, if you're in an RV park, usually the laundry facility is fairly small. So you got to make sure you plan it right, or you have to go out in town and do your laundry. It's not a big deal. I mean, you just got to plan it.
You know, one issue that came up when I first started talking about your book on my Facebook page was the expense involved in parking your RV different places. Have you? I mean, what is a range? Does it go per day? Can you park per month? I haven't done that myself really, except on camping trips. So what is a range for you? And have you found that to be, you know, a significant expense?
To me, remember, I've always had, you know, a house payment. So right. To me, it's always cheap. You know, I've owned houses since I was in my 20s. It ranges. Now you can, the daily rates, what's happened as it's become more popular since I first started is the daily rates have gone up. That I have noticed. So the daily rates are getting really comparable to a hotel. That's why I do not take my RV on daily, because I go, if I got to go somewhere, I might as well just go and get a hotel.
So what are we talking about? $75 a night?
50 to 75 to 100. I mean, it can get up there. Yeah, it's gotten outrageous in some places.
I had no idea. Wow.
Yeah. Monthly, though, it depends. It varies widely where you're at what part of the country. Southern California, your monthly is expensive. I've found them up to $2,000 a month.
Wow.
Yeah. But up here, where I'm at, when I'm up here, I'm spending $300 a month. That's what I spend up here. So you can see a huge variation in price. And you just have to look around. The more, you know, less populated areas you're going to go to, the cheaper it's going to be. When you get to metropolitan areas, it's going to be more expensive. And
probably fewer amenities too. You know, you don't necessarily have to have a place that has a swimming pool or,
exactly.
You know, yeah.
Most of them, the ones up here, don't have laundry facilities.
Yeah.
You know, the smaller ones. And I don't care. It's not a big deal. You just go to the town next to it and you do your laundry there. That's what I've always done. And I bring my work with me. You know, I bring and I sit there with my laptop and I write, you know, or do whatever I need to do.
When we did the camper van in Iceland and then in Ireland, and Gary, the laundry was one of the biggest. I mean, we would wear the same clothes and sleep in them for 2 or 3 days, just because sometimes we'd be in places where it was so inconvenient to do the laundry. So I can, and that's the kind of little everyday chore we all take for granted. And unless you're actually out there, you don't even know. This pile gets, I know of a family who was in an RV for a year and they just ended up using the bathtub in the RV as their laundry basket, you know, because it gets overwhelming. Kim wants to know if you're a member of any RV clubs.
I am not. I've thought about it, but I don't travel that way.
Okay.
So they're great. But if you're going to do it and you're going to stay in your RV and you're just going to travel full time, I would highly recommend getting in an RV group or association, because it's just a great network. I'm more of a nomad. I kind of, if you people haven't noticed, I kind of do things on my own way.
Right. Yeah.
I like my own little adventure, and I take my bumps, and they're all self-induced, a lot of them. But you know, if you're going to do it, I would highly recommend. And it's a great way to ask questions as well of people who have been doing it, and just it gives you discounts. You'll get discounts for the RV parks. And they give you free maps that tell you where all the RV parks are. So yeah, they're a great resource. I'm just one of those guys. I just jump online and look and go, okay, where am I going?
Yeah. And online, I would expect there'd be forums and tons of resources and campgrounds with the ratings and the expense and the price, you know, and the features already there. Any other questions? Let's see. Hillary wants to know there are a number of my readers and followers who are into prepping, and they're thinking of worst case scenarios. One of the popular, I don't even know if it's a myth, but some people imagine that, you know, if everything hits the fan in their city, they're going to get in their RV and they're going to hit the road. I don't know, how practical do you think that is? What would be the drawbacks of, you know, just kind of getting away, let's say, from a city, you know, where all hell is broken loose for some reason or another? Is that anything that has ever crossed your mind?
It has. I don't live in cities anymore. I got away from that when I left. I grew up, and that's if you don't know my background, I grew up in a very, very small rural area. I grew up in the sticks. So that's what I know. I mean, that's how I grew up. This wasn't something brand new to me. I grew up in a single wide trailer in the middle of nowhere. So I would say in a city, if it hits the fan and you got to get out of there in a natural disaster and you've got a travel trail RV, you're going to be stuck in traffic like everyone else. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, you're not getting anywhere.
Right.
That's the downside of a city. And that's how I looked at it. You know, when natural disasters happen in cities, it's chaos. It just goes nutty. People lose their minds. I had power go out in San Diego. This was years ago, and I just bought my generator that I was going to use up here. It was the guy in Arizona, some line worker somehow disconnected the power to like 3 or 4 states. I can't remember what he did, but it was an all-out blackout, knocked everything out.
Yeah.
And they predicted it was going to be out for 2 to 3 days. It was such a bad breakdown. People lost their minds. I mean, I heard gunshots going off, people lighting all their fireworks, whatever they had. People were throwing parties. And I was in a more rural area. I could hear it. I mean, there was no power. I'm just sitting around. I could hear all the, and of course the power came on at like 2:30 in the morning, way earlier. So all those people who were being dumb had to go to work the next day.
Right.
That day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The traffic issue, fuel would be an issue. Security could be an issue. For those of you, have any of you watched World War Z with Brad Pitt?
Yeah.
Early in the movie, he and his family, they find an RV just sitting there, abandoned with the keys in it. And, you know, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you know, that's perfect. You know, run, get away. And they have to stop at a grocery store to get supplies and medication for the daughter. But I was looking at that RV and thinking that would not be a bad idea. But there are drawbacks, just like anything, you know, whether or not you stay, you know, a rural area, you know, can have its drawbacks. But that's interesting. And so thanks for answering that question. Any other questions before we finish up? I think hitting the road, Gary, is kind of a dream, even if it's in the far back of our minds, that a lot of people just imagine. It could be, it appeals to them because of the stress of everyday living, you know, a frustrating job situation, or feeling just overburdened, like you said, by belongings, maybe by debt. And the idea of just hitting the road and just being gone. There's just a sense of freedom in that. And I can understand how that appeals to some people. So I'm not seeing questions. Last chance for questions. As you watch the recording, ask your questions in the comments, and then we'll do our best to get those to you. I'm going to put a link, an Amazon link to Gary's book. He's written another one book, right, Gary?
I have 3 out total right now. I've written 6. I took 3 off the market. I used to be primarily health, and I'm and people are saying I've done all this on my own. I'm independently published. I do all this on my own. So the last 3 books, the most recent, I have 3, and The Simple Life, the 2 in that is a series. So that's, I talked about the Decluttering Your Life book in the Simple Life series will come out next year. Okay. So I think that'll help a lot of people looking for the lifestyle, because I'm going to get into
And I think that your book about just the off-grid living and that whole process of getting that set up is good. A couple questions. We'll answer these and then we'll call it a day. Do you travel with guns?
Oh boy, I've been asked that one numerous times. Yes and no is the best answer. I have a concealed carry permit. Obviously prior law enforcement. It's tricky. It is really, really tricky, because you travel through states where my concealed carry is good in like 32 states, I believe. But I travel through states where it's not good to get to another state.
Yeah.
So you worry, you go, oh my God, if I get pulled over, what's going to happen? And, you know, I don't get pulled over usually, but if you do, you know, they do have the right to take your weapons and lock you up. Right. I mean, that is a fact. But I do travel with weapons. I have a bow as well, which is different, but I travel with my bow because I take that stuff with me. I hunt, I fish, I have all my fishing poles, my guns, my bow. I like that stuff. So I take it with me, just like my mountain bikes. They're all tools of what I do. So yeah, you just have to, I would recommend getting a concealed carry to alleviate a lot of because even if you get pulled over in a state that maybe doesn't, you know, honor it, at least you have one, right? So they know, and you can explain, I'm traveling through to go to this place where my concealed carry is valid. Yeah. Yeah. I
think that's a good point, because that is something that's crossed our mind. Even when we were moving from Arizona to Texas, you know, we're thinking, you know, we had to check on the laws of New Mexico to make sure we'd be okay. So that's a very good point. One final question from Chris. I'm going to see if I can understand all this. If you could get out I think he's referring to you know, an shit hits the fan kind of scenario, I think.
Okay.
Because if you could get out, would it make sense to go to a national park and try to, I guess he's wondering if you could just go out and just park anywhere, just find a little, you know, a little sheltered area in a national park, a state park, you know, so a state national forest.
I'm sure, you know, in a natural disaster situation, all the rules that usually apply are going to be relaxed because people are trying to get out. You hope. You know, no one knows. You don't know until you go do it.
Yeah, a lot of unknowns.
I would hope so. And it would vary. It varies states, even if it's a national park, it's going to vary state to state, you know, different, you know, obviously the forest, it's going to be a different group in that state. I was in the government, trust me. It depends. You just don't know what you're going to run into.
Yep.
You know, I could not see it being a problem. I wouldn't imagine.
Yeah. I mean, it could just the individual, you know, maybe the individual park ranger, an individual law enforcement person, who knows, you know, they may just look the other way or it may not. So, you know, Gary, thank you. I was looking forward to our conversation, you know, ever since we scheduled it. And I can tell from the comments and the questions that there was a lot of interest here. And I expect that there will be a number of people watching the recording. It's going to be available as a recorded video here on Facebook. And I'm also going to upload it over on YouTube. So if you'd like to watch it over there, you can. So thank you, Gary. I enjoyed this, and best of luck to you with your books.
Before we go, because I didn't tell you, for all the people who will be watching this or asking questions, I do not actively use social media anymore. I got away from it this year as part of, I don't consider it part of the lifestyle I live in a way. I don't begrudge people who use it, but I have chose not to. So if you need to get a hold of me, this has been my rule this year, is you can go to my website and I have a contact form. I answer all my emails personally to this day, long as it's not something crazy or outrageous or spammy. If you have a direct question, I have consulting services too. I consult with people who are looking for the lifestyle. We'll schedule something. But if you go to my Facebook page, you're going to notice that it's pretty dead. Okay. So if you have something, Lisa, you may have to forward it to me if it's and I'm going to be gone all day today. So
that's okay. That's okay. It'll be here on Facebook, you know, indefinitely or until Facebook shuts down. What is your website URL?
It is www.thesimplelifenow.com. Okay. I sell all my books. I have a health supplement line that I've sold for years because I started in health. And sign up for my newsletter too. That is how I stay in touch with people.
Right.
That's how I tell them. If you want to be in touch with me, and figure out, see what I'm doing, that's where my updates are. It's the best way.
You know what, Gary, a lot of us that are in authors or, you know, we speak to, you know, people out there across the country and around the world. Facebook is getting old for us too. And I'm always further options.
The way I explain it to people is, and it's not that I don't use, I use social media as a tool for certain things, but I tell my explanation, and a lot of people appreciate this, is just because I write books and I have a business, I don't think it's fair to me that people have a direct pipeline into my life. You know what I mean? And that's what Facebook has done, is you can reach out at me at any given point and people expect your undivided attention and you to respond. And I take a look at it from the psychological perspective of that is an unhealthy life for me and for you. You know, it's hitting the easy button is the way I look at it. It's going, hey, Gary, I'm going to ask you this question for free that may be in your book anyway. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. And I don't mean it to be mean, but it's just, you know, I have a life to live and I have things I have to get done. And if I'm on social media all the time, I can't get those things done.
Oh, it's a huge distractor. In some ways, I mean, social media is beneficial, and I think more so it has become a negative. And that really is unfortunate, because I know that for many people, it's a way to reach out to others and to learn and to, you know, to feel like they're part of a community. And yet what's ironic about social media is that social media is the end of the day, you close your laptop or you turn off your computer and you're still alone. And really what I think is distressing to me is that it gives you a false sense of community, that it can, it can become supportive and so on. But a lot of times it takes the place of what we do in real life with real connections and, real life hobbies and real life. But
it makes you lazy in the sense of you're not working on the true connections that you should be. And I just did an interview a couple of days and we got into this, talking about this. I said, all my really close friends, which I've had for decades. I mean, I have a couple friends I was babysat together with. We're still in touch to this day. That we do not ever contact each other via social media. We never have. We call each other. We'll text each other. We'll email each other, but mainly it's interaction, or we obviously see each other in person. That is how your relationships should be. Those are people I truly care about. How can you interact and have true relationships with 4,000 friends? You can't.
Right. And you know what? I'm going to sign off, Gary, and tell you this. I met my husband in an AOL chat room.
No way. That was a long time. AOL, that was a long time ago in the chat room.
AOL, we've been married, I think, 23 years. So it can't happen. That's why it's like, okay, it depends on how you use it. Does it become a substitute, for actual friendships? Does it, is it a barrier between you and maybe getting out and doing some things that you really want to do deep down? So yeah,
but that was prior social media, technically. You have to remember that chat rooms and all that, there wasn't a whole lot of people in those back in those days. It was much smaller community. Yeah.
All it took was just one right person in the chat room. Okay, Gary, I'm going to say goodbye, and the rest of you enjoy the recording and leave your questions, and I'll figure out a way to get the questions to you, or people can go to your website, which is right there on the screen, and they can contact you that way. I really appreciate your candidness, telling us, the pros and the cons, and not really kind of glossing over like this is something glamorous and just get out there on the road. It takes forethought and planning, and it's not always, I'm sure there, like with life anywhere, it has its ups and downs. So I want to thank you for that information and for your candidness. All right, everybody. I'm planning on being online again in another couple of days, talking about the hurricane and probably water safety. In the meantime, my phone's going off. So I'm going to say goodbye and talk to you later. Bye, Gary.
Thanks.